Hello, I'm David Heyman, and I play Brace on the TV show Taboo. And you're listening to the Shat on TV podcast with Roger, Gene, and Big D.
Welcome back to Taboo FX by Shat on TV, the unofficial podcast companion piece to the hit FX and BBC series Taboo. I am your host, Gene Lyons, and alongside me is my co-host, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
This is our deep dive episode where we take a look back on this week's episode of Taboo and provide our immediate reactions, thoughts, and analysis. This week's episode was episode 7. Big D, what'd you think?
I think it was good. I think it's strong. You can see the finish line coming now. And although I think it's still high quality, I'm still enjoying it. I think Tom Hardy's killing it as James Delaney. I do feel the ending, I don't know how well they're going to stick it. I think it's going to be a more traditional close and less something memorable that we're really going to be talking about for years.
Episode 7 was a weird one for me because it did advance the plot greatly. It did, again, show more of the vulnerability of Delaney. But again, it brought to that question, which I'm afraid we're all thinking, is all of this a part of his plan? Is it all carefully orchestrated? How much of this is in his control and how much isn't? In this episode, we see him willingly give himself up to arrest and torture, which makes you wonder how much of the other things were in his control or out of his control. It also is strange because we've got the last episode coming up. This was the penultimate episode. And it's one of those things where if he is going to rise from failure to triumph in one episode, it's going to be one hell of an episode. It's going to be hard to write.
I think also the pacing has been all over the place. The first part of the season, they had really stretched it out and let it kind of marinate. To me, this felt like a microwave dinner. It was just too quick, too compact, and too rushed.
So some of the things we're going to talk about on this episode are what is James's new end game? What cards does he have left to play? We'll also discuss what we learned from his arrest, what was revealed in that arrest. In addition, we're going to talk about Brace and his confession to James, if it was genuine, if he poisoned Horace out of love, or if he's acting in this. We're going to talk about Lorna playing a bigger part in James's plan, and also talk about James's visions and what they mean. We're seeing a lot of his visions in this episode. We're going to go through some of those. We'll also discuss James and Chichester. Chichester is getting through with his investigation and really coming to some closure here, even going as far as confronting Stuart Strange. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. And finally, we're going to look more into the budding romance or lack thereof between James and Zilpha. I'm excited to get started on it. So Big D, you put this one down as something you'd like to discuss, and I am hot to discuss it.
We can start with what's his new end game and what cards does he have left to play. His entire freedom in life right now depends on one thing. Is Helga and the other prostitute being held by the EIC remaining within their custody? James has to, above all else, get Atticus to use the address that Goddard has now provided him to get the girls out. The EIC's entire leverage against James and the Crown's entire investigation on James is based upon the testimony of those two. So, do you think James is going to go against what he said earlier in the episode and have Atticus kill them? Or is he just going to try to rescue them, take them away as hostages so they can't testify? What do you think he's going to do with them?
Well, James has the opportunity, certainly, to have Helga taken out, as you mentioned, with Atticus. He says that she's been through enough, and I take him at his word on that. I don't think that is his aim. He's definitely using Helga as a part of a plan. Remember that he has that conversation with Chichester, who basically has a plan for him, right? You give us the testimony, we will then give you the pardon for the crime. You can take down Sir Strange. So it seems like if that was his motivation, he would just do it that way. Instead, James tells Chichester he's got another plan, and we never get to hear what that plan is. So I can't help but believe that he knows Helga's going to rat him out, and that's part of his plan. It's putting a specific wheel in motion that he needs in motion.
No, he actually does reveal what the other plan is with George. George says that he believes that James is the only survivor from the ship. James knows he's not a reliable witness to be called in to testify, but he does have a more reliable witness who was there for the entire 12 years at the EIC. James could only testify to what went on the ship, but that doesn't implicate the EIC leadership or Stuart Strange implicitly in the illegal act of slave trade. So getting George connected with Godders is that other plan.
It's interesting because James is offering as sort of a way to calm Godders down or to give him insight into his plan. He keeps telling Godders, we're gonna sail away. There will be no judgment of you. He's selling this fairy tale, and he almost seems delusional in the sense that Godders is well aware that he doesn't have a boat. I mean, this guy is offering passage as a part of his reassurance that you're going to be safe, and doesn't even have a ship to sail on.
But at this point, Godders has to believe in James. He's got nothing else left. Once the EIC understands that he has been speaking with George, he's a dead man. He knows he's not going to make it to an actual hearing to testify. So James really makes a key play in connecting him and George right now, and then go right away to Atticus, tell him where Helga is, but also write down your account and your testimony for Atticus to keep safe. So if something does happen, at least we hope the wheels of justice will, take Stuart Strange down even after the fact. But here we're asking now the end game. Why do you think James wants to meet one-on-one in the tower with Sir Stuart Strange?
Yeah, that's the one piece I can't piece together. I'm hoping that anybody else has any ideas, because it seems it would be just as easy to meet him anywhere else. He's very specific about that. When James is taken prisoner and he's taken to the tower, he's being interrogated by Coop, and he tells Coop what he wants. It's not just a meeting with Strange. It's not just a private meeting with Strange. It's not just a meeting in a cell with Strange in private. It's a meeting in a cell with Strange in private in the Tower of London. It's very, very specific, and I still cannot figure out what the purpose is.
Well, there's only two end games that James could be going for here. One would be to trick Sir Stuart Strange into self-incriminating himself. He has no direct real evidence other than testimony of Godders that he knew what was going on. If he were able to, it's cliche, and we've seen it in so many as a trope in so many movies where you have the criminal in the interrogation room, and he tricks the cop into admitting he'd been dirty the whole time, and everyone else is listening, and the cops come in and rescue him. I hope it's not James trying to convince him to actually implicate himself in it.
It's interesting because as we're talking about James negotiating with Coop to get a meeting with Strange, you also have Strange negotiating with Coop. And this is something that surprised me, was given the information that they had about, from Helga, the EIC chose to go to the Crown and to make another deal, essentially. They said, we will give you this testimony against James Delaney, which will allow you to gain access to Nootka. We want the monopoly. That's all we want out of this. So the deal is basically King George can have the land of Nootka. We want the trade monopoly. And it's exactly as James feared, these two powers coming back together again, not being at odds again, not being at war. It's interesting that Coop has now become this pivotal negotiation point.
Yeah, Coop, though, when they're negotiating out in the hallway and they're talking about how convenient it was that these two whores would turn up and provide the EIC with everything they wanted, the reps of the EIC throw in something. Yeah, it was luck, but it was also strategy. That strategy comment did not go unnoticed by Coop. He gives a look as though there is something else going on behind the scenes and still remains skeptical of the EIC's ulterior motives.
I thought it was interesting in all of this as James is, kind of forming his coup de grace, and at the same time being tortured. It's a very odd place to be plotting from. Dr. Dumbarton, everyone else scatters, right? So Godders is like, I'm getting the hell out of here. You've got the burning of the letters by Musgrove. Everyone seems to be clearing out, but Dumbarton is not concerned at all. He very clearly says one of his jobs is dyeing fabrics, and he says that, not until the blues are blue, the whites are white, and the reds are red, I'm not going anywhere. He seems not concerned with this at all, which leads me again to question where his alliance is. Also, if you notice during that montage of everyone burning their letters, the one person you don't see burning any evidence, you see Chudley doing it, you see Musgrove doing it, you don't see Dumbarton destroying anything.
Yeah, also, Dumbarton's assistant comes running down the stairs with news of James's arrest. And if you really listen to what he said, it's peculiar. He says, the merchant has been arrested for high treason. He's in league with the Americans we must clear out. If Dumbarton is the Americans, why would you be speaking of them as an additional party to the conversation?
I love that you caught that. Yeah, it seems very odd. I think Dumbarton, as you've mentioned in previous episodes, is not what he presents himself as. He is definitely a strange and questionable character. We don't see him directly in contact with any of the other American contacts that James seems to have, but he also seems to be not fully trusted by James either. So I could see that, he might be an additional player in all this that we weren't even counting for, not on any side that we've even calculated.
Yeah, I think the last card that we really see James is going to play, he isn't going to make the gunpowder go boom. He's going to try to implicate the East India as being complicit with the Republicans and the revolution. That would be the ultimate revenge. Because everything then, we've seen that when you're charged with high treason, and it is, what did they say? It was corruption of blood. Everything that you own, everything that your family owns, everything that their family owns becomes part of the crown. If he were able to implicate Sir Stuart Strange of the EIC, he would not only destroy the company, but all of the families down the line that had been responsible. Last two quick things here, and we can kind of go on. We see that James is writing little handwritten notes to those directly around him and family members. We see one to Brace, one to Chamonley. He then later on gives Robert the key to the safe. Is this a goodbye tour that James is doing for those around him? Is he setting up a way to kind of take care of them? Or is this something else? Does he have, like he says, I have a use for you? Does he have one more use for these people?
It's interesting because when people are about to commit suicide, this is a strange thing that I was taught as an RA. They said, when we're watching students in college to see if they might be suicidal, if they seem despondent or erratic, and then they seem to find this calm and put their things in order, that might be a sign of farewell. That might be a sign that they're ready to go. And I honestly, when James was at the Molly house and kind of said goodbye to Goddard's and sat there and kind of was gathering up the cards, I thought for sure we were going to see something that either was designed to make us believe that he was killed or that this was going to be some sort of a last stand for him. And I found it a wholly unsatisfying scene that almost didn't need to be played out. Or maybe that was the intent. It was to kind of make us think we're falling off a cliff and there's a ledge right beneath it.
But did you notice what he's doing on his trip to the Molly house? He's being generous with every beggar, every street urchin, every child. He's doling out gold and silver. He knows tomorrow's not there, so maybe he is getting his affairs in order.
Certainly. And again, he has no way of knowing he's going to survive this because now they couldn't kill him before because everything would go to the Americans, but now they've got a way to be able to dispose of him and still be able to grab Nootka and grab those trade routes. So James, as we mentioned, one of the plays he does have is Chichester. Chichester has been blessed by the Crown to perform this investigation into the sinking of the Cornwallis. And James is, as you mentioned, what he believes to be the last remaining survivor of the crew.
Yeah, and we learned some key details here that we had thought were a possibility, but we have them confirmed now. We learned that James definitely was on the Cornwallis, and he personally had a hand in nailing down the cargo holds that trapped and doomed the 280 souls when the ship sank. But the bigger thing we learn is that James himself was a slave and that he traveled to Volta?
Right. The Volta River is a river in the northern region of Ghana. So again, it places him squarely in Ghana, which then puts him at the port of Cabinda. So basically, again, this is just giving us geographic reference. When James went to Volta, he was a slave.
The Ghana connection also makes sense because the dialect which James speaks is Twi, and Twi is prominently spoken in Ghana. So that definitely ties that entire piece together. But James, we wondered where the diamonds came from. James was a slave, became a slave trader, and then robbed a fellow slave trader of the diamonds. But it seemed as though James, we've always believed, was guilt-ridden by his involvement in the slave trade. I didn't get that vibe here from any of the conversation. He doesn't seem to have any guilt. There was no form of compassion or regret.
I think James is able to compartmentalize his actions because they had a purpose, or that they served, again, with the people that surround him. Everything is about what is in service of some mission. Interestingly, it was a poignant display when you had James speaking to Chichester, a former slave, James as a former slave, and being able to not show any remorse, being that cold about it. In addition, James says this very clearly to Chichester, because Chichester says he believes in justice, and James says, but he's also a rationalist. And James says, what kind of rational man believes in justice? I think this is a signal from the show that James isn't after justice, nor does he believe in justice. Similar words were spoken in Way of the Gun, one of my favorite movies. And it's this notion that in order for to believe in justice, you have to believe in sort of fate. You have to have a fatalistic viewpoint that there's some sort of balance, and there really isn't. And so justice is irrelevant. What's relevant is purpose and fulfilling that purpose.
Yeah, I hope, as I'd mentioned before, that the gunpowder will not be used to kill, but actually someone will be held accountable for their crimes. And maybe it'll be a return to reason.
So after speaking with Chichester and then speaking with Goddard at the Molly house, James awaits his arrest. The soldiers eventually show up. They take him in with very little fanfare, a pop in the face, and suddenly he's in the Tower of London. So now he's been arrested. This arrest to me was a key moment in the episode. It told us a lot about what's going on, a lot about people's motivations, and a lot about what James's plan is. So what did we learn, Big D, from James's arrest?
So what we've learned, besides what we mentioned before about who the conspirators were, that is the key component that Coop is interested in getting. He needs, now that James, he believes, is lock, stock, and barrel, he's caught as the manufacturer of the gunpowder, he needs to know who are the conspirators, who helped create it, code words, passphrases. He wanted to know the entire American underground channel of correspondence, and he's going to do whatever he can.
I've been to the Tower of London and, of course, had to take the tour and seen all the torture devices. I did not recall seeing this thing that was used on James. To me, it looked like some sort of a giant handheld flesh shredder. And when they tore his pants the first time, I was like, I thought there was another thing. I think it's called the crocodile or the alligator or something like that. And what it was it looked like a vice grips basically, but it had teeth. And they would heat it up in a fire, and then they would place it on your genitals, clamp it down, and then pull, and they would rip your genitals off, and you'd normally die from that. I don't think that's what happened to James. At first I did, though, because the way Coop covers up his face, I'm like, they just tore his dick off.
It looks like a giant cheese grater. When you go out to a nice Italian restaurant, and they're actually going to give you some fresh grated Parmesan right at the table. But the key point, they have a doctor on standby. They have the torturer. They're going to help James walk that thin line between life and death. James's last 10 years and his hallucinations, his travels, his visions seem to have trained him very well to resist this torture. He's prepared. They're waterboarding him, and he seems like the best prepared to deal with it. This is sometimes like a day in the lake for James.
Interesting fact about waterboarding. I did some research on that after watching this because I was like, has it been around that long? I don't remember hearing about waterboarding until recently, and then I thought maybe it had been invented in the 70s, the 80s. Seems like a fairly modern form of torture. This during the Spanish Inquisition, so going back to like the 1500s, this was considered light torture during the Inquisition. So this is how they got started. I was surprised they went flesh shredder first, which, by the way, I did go back watching slow motion. They did take some pains to show that it is actually, there's bloody flesh coming up through the thing. But anyway, I thought they would go to that. Like, look, waterboarding doesn't seem nearly as bad as flesh shredding to me.
Remember, you got to keep them alive. You can jump right to the bloody instruments, but this is, again, 1800s London. It wouldn't take much. That doctor really can't help him walk that line. That line's real thin. Waterboarding seems the safest to keep him guaranteed alive.
To anybody who does doubt how I've had so many conversations with people about waterboarding, though, and they're like, "Oh, that doesn't seem so bad." They put a cloth over your face and they pour water. It's really, really bad. So in case you don't understand it, you're at an angle where your head is lower than your feet if it's done correctly. They put the cloth over your face, and when they pour that water is going in your mouth, in your nostrils. You feel like you were drowning, and then they bring you back, and then they do it again, and they do. So imagine just like feeling like you're drowning for any length of time.
You know you're not going to drown, but your body feels and reacts in the way that you are. The same as if somebody were holding you underwater. It is very effective. If you don't believe it, maybe we'll have a Shat the Movies outing one day, and we'll go out to a park and just start waterboarding our listeners.
I remember when I used to think that being pepper sprayed wasn't as bad as being hit with a stun gun. And after having both done to me voluntarily, pepper spray is real bad. So Coop wants this list of conspirators from James. If you're not getting, or if you miss the way that works, James is playing for time here. He basically tells Coop, look, you can torture me, but the clock is ticking, and the longer it takes you, the more chance these guys have of getting away. The torturer says he's going to break James in an hour or two. 12 hours later, you see the Prince Regent finally tell Coop, fuck it, give him what he wants. We need to get a hold of these people. Now, 12 hours... That's too long, man. They had no idea what they were looking for. They had no idea who they were looking for. It's safe to assume, I think, that basically anybody who they're looking for, who had the opportunity to get out of the country, is long gone. So another thing that's revealed in this episode is Brace comes clean on killing Horace.
Hold on. Does he come clean, or is he kind of caught?
Brace confesses to killing Horace, and here's how that works. When we started off the show, we thought we were wrong. We thought this was a whodunit. And we thought this was going to be an 8-episode wrapping up the mystery. James is going to come home and solve who killed his father. I think by episode 4 or so, that had changed entirely. It wasn't a whodunit anymore. That seemed to be a secondary question. And Big D, to your credit, from the get-go, you were pointing at the butler. I think that's, I think it's been shown now that it was him. Although, again, you can't trust anybody in this show, and you don't know, A, if it in fact was Brace, but B, why he did it. Was it, he says he did it out of love. Was it out of love?
And I think that's the big question on why James didn't just come back and kill him. James, from the moment he walked back in the house, when he announced that Brace was the head of the mutineers, he knew he had gone to the apothecary and purchased a ton of arsenic, but yet there were still rats in the house. So he knew that Brace had killed his father, but he wanted to find out why. And at this point, having been back in London long enough and being with Brace, he believed that, Brace, whether he's correct or not, that Horace was no longer a Christian soul. Do you also buy the fact that he was, killing Horace as a form of mercy?
It seems strange, but after seeing the way he was working his hands bloody afterward, and the way that look, I'm going to be honest. I think ever since David Heyman recorded that intro for the show, I'm having trouble blurring the lines there. And I'm like, he's a good guy. He's a good guy. So we're biased here. But look, I think this makes sense. If you had to endure and see a man going crazy like that, again, he said he was burning his own flesh. He was going crazy. And Brace does have, it explains that slight bit of vinegar that Brace has towards James, that slight bit of contempt he has, that he says, you didn't get here soon enough.
Yeah, he essentially broke Brace. He didn't come at Brace with the facts. He worked Brace, almost guilted him into confessing, to the point where Brace I felt like he was walking into the principal's office, or a child coming to their parent, and the parent had already known what the child was doing. And Brace fully expects for James to kill him. He completely expects and is shocked when James tells him to go down to the kitchen and help Lorna with the chicken. Do you think it was what had gone on that entire... Well, was it a goose or a duck?
Duck.
Okay.
Duck. Goose?
Do you feel... Because I got it, that it wasn't the entire time they'd been together, but the fact that Brace kept Horace's buttons as a memento of who the man was that pushed James over the edge?
As far as not killing him?
As far as believing his intentions were pure and he was still looking out for Horace.
I think there's a degree of that. I think also we have to remember that James claims that he's been in contact with his father or prior to his father's death, that they were able to communicate. He also, having looked into the trunk, having known about the treatment of his mother, may not have that same affinity toward his father as he did before, and maybe does not blame Brace for what he did. James is not a reasonable person, but he's a, what do they say on Grosse Point Blank, a morally flexible person. I think that he can understand certain motivations.
Talking about Brace and finally going down there to help Lorna with the duck. This episode, Lorna really takes a big role. She's out on her own. She's being proactive. She takes in young Robert. She's going to get him something to eat, a place to stay, slams the door in Chamonly. She goes out and does a little, what, Chamonly? I always butcher it.
I like that you wrote it down as Chunli and still pronounced it Chamonly.
You have to understand, I'm slightly dyslexic, so often I talk myself into, okay, I think it's Chamonly, but then I'm like, no, it's Chumley. No, it's by disability. Just bear with me, people. Lorna takes it upon herself to do a little London CSI and get to the bottom of who actually killed Winter. We see in the beginning when James is having one of his visions that he questions whether he did it himself, but it turns out it was the EIC. Do you think Lorna has a bigger role to play still, or have we seen her major effects on the entire plot, or does she still have something big to contribute?
Okay, let's not lose sight of the fact of how Lorna was presented in the beginning. I think that's a really key indication. Now, on several shows, you see a person develop over multiple episodes into something that you never knew they could be. Going back to Firefly, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, basically any Joss Whedon thing. In any event, Breaking Bad, great example. So Lorna, in this case, though, remember, she's supposed to be an actress that James took into his home because she claimed to be his stepmother, essentially, right? Does any of this seem like the actions of an actress who just happens to be hanging out in the house? She, in multiple episodes now, has gone out investigating things. She's looking at strategy. She's got a very keen mind. She is much more than she's presenting. And at this point, it seems like she's not even making an effort to play up the actress role anymore. She's done with that.
No, she's the most competent. She puts everyone else to shame. She spots that little boy and the guilt in his face, tracks him through the streets of London to their little homeless hangout. Amazing. There is no way she's an actress. She is done hiding it. I think in the end, when all seems lost, Lorna will come in to save the day, I hope.
Now, Big D, you mentioned that James doesn't know if he had killed Winter at the time of the funeral. But later we see him speaking with her. And this is part of several visions that he had during the show that were giving us some indications of what's going on in his head. But if you believe a step further, what's going on kind of in the supernatural realm.
Yeah, these were the first set of visions that were really clear. They weren't clouded by effect or lighting. And they actually added some more characters that we hadn't seen before. The main vision starts off where James is speaking to Winter and asking if she is now among those who, sing to him and asks her, did I do this by my hand, as the vision ends? So James is unsure. But the visions continue on, and we start to see a vision of his father. His mother is more clearly defined in the vision, and the resemblance to Zilpha is striking. We questioned on the River Rant last week whether they could be related. There is no doubt there's a resemblance there. But did you get any big things from his visions that would lead you either way to believe? Is this, astral projection? Is this some kind of precognition, a mental illness? What do you think it is?
I'm not sure. I'm starting to not really like the style in which they shoot these, though. Obviously, when they were told, okay, hey, you got to make some scenes where, again, there's astral projection or precognition or memories or whatever, you have, as a director, as cinematographers, as producers, you have a certain ability to mold the way those are going to be presented. I felt a lot of these were a little too American Horror Story for me, a little too Marilyn Manson for me. And look, I like spooky things, but they've lost the spook factor because they're so garish that they don't really work for me. I feel like also there's probably thousands of people out there who are playing these in slow motion or watching them frame by frame and are eventually going to be very frustrated with the fact that they probably don't mean, there's probably not as much in them visually as we expect. They're just kind of be symbolic in a sense. That being said, I think that...
Hold on. I am one of those.
Okay, go for it.
Because I actually did slow it down and did pause them. In the rapid succession of frames, where Zilpha, you see it looks like she's, in the throes of passion. We see her face down and there's a beast on her back. The beast lifts off the mask and it is revealed to be Thorn. It is her husband on top of her in a mask that we had seen, the same vision that Zilpha had had the night that we debated whether there was the remote rape. There's also there's the faces where it's James and then it flips to his father and then it flips to, I hope it's not the what was it, the Wendigo? I hope it isn't some kind of spirit, but there is a lot going on in those flashbacks. I need some context to it and maybe a little more time to put on my tinfoil hat, but it wasn't there just for effect.
But do you think it's good television to have to do that in the sense that, again, if I'm watching something, you can build mystery into a scene without making it just so fast that I would have to sit there and, to me, it makes it hard to digest the things that I'm supposed to digest out of it if you just make it so fast that I can't even tell what's going on. Totally agree.
If you need a second viewing or almost an after show to help people understand it, or if you, granted, we do a podcast about a TV show, but you shouldn't need the podcast or the after show to enjoy the show. So for that fact, yeah, I think it's too much if they're hiding nuggets in there. If they just add to the overall atmosphere and the world building, I'm okay with it. But I shouldn't need an answer key or 5 hours of studying to understand or enjoy the show. That being said, continue to listen to Shat on TV as we cover your favorite television.
We're doing American Gods next, by the way. So with getting back to Winter, if I may, I forgot to bring this up, but you said that he says, you're among them now, the ones who sing to me. What James actually said, because I thought this is a beautiful line, he says, you're among them now, the ones who used to sing to me. And I think that's interesting because we see earlier in the show when Helga's having kind of the eulogy read to her, and when they put her out to the river, and she asks Atticus to put her where her body can drop into the river, but they want, and her soul belongs to Helga. She wants to wash out to sea. I think this is an indication that James acknowledges some sort of a higher echelon of being, maybe angels or something like that. And that's the way I saw it, is that he has been excommunicated from anything holy. And so the ones who used to sing to me, these sort of a being on high, and that would be kind of a touching ending for Winter, is that she's basically among the angels.
I took the singing to mean something much darker. We know that slaves use song often as a form of resistance or a form of morale building. Those who sang to him were the slaves in the cargo hold as he was manning the ship.
Damn. No, that's... I'm put in an awkward position now where I was thinking about angels and you were thinking about slavery.
I think it was the slaves who sang to him, but then they also became the visions, like you had said. Once they had drowned, they continued to sing to him. But I think it's the slaves.
That's dark. This is the second time, Big D, you've been mega dark on this episode. So with regards to Winter's death, Helga, we see her take 2 shots at James in this episode. One goes right through his hat. The other hits the ground near him. James does not retaliate. Again, he's expressed to Atticus as well that he doesn't want anything to happen to her. She's been through enough. At first, I thought Helga is either a bad shot or wanted to miss, that she was just trying to spook him. Then I realized at the end, you notice that she expresses frustration, and I think that's because she knows he can't be killed. She takes 2 shots at him, and then there's a frustrated look on her face. She's like, "Fuck," and she gives up on it.
Yeah, and that would make sense because her next move then is, if I can't kill him, I might as well try to get him incarcerated, and that drives her to the East India. So I think that would make complete sense.
I do appreciate the show does not answer the question: can this man be killed, or is it, as we mentioned on the River Rants, is it the sort of thing where he knows when his time is and it's not now? That again, Big D would explain when he's when he's talking with Zilpha, and she says, we have time, and no, we don't. we don't have time. And where he's giving away his possessions when he's, seems to have a sort of resignation. This also coincides with the entrance into episode 8. Do you think we're going to see him die in episode 8?
Now, normally I would say yes. Going on the storytelling and what we've seen, I would believe it. But then I hear all the stuff about potential season 2 and season 3. And I'm wondering, could they go on without him? Would they? But I'm going to throw it all on the table. Yes, I believe he will die. I think he should die. It will be if he somehow rides off into the sunset, or even worse, that they allow the season to end with his fate unclear, to we don't know if he died. Did he go down with the ship? Did he somehow survive? Don't give me that shit. We need him to die. Yes, he will die.
If you're prone to writing into the River Rants and you want to share your opinion on this, hosts at shadontv.com, please write in this week. If you can't think of something to write about whether you think James is going to die. Normally we don't entertain the what ifs. I think this is a good one, though. We got an episode coming up next week where we're going to find out what happens. Does he die in episode 8? Let's check it out. Let's see how that goes.
Well, I want to throw it back to you. What do you think?
I hope so. I mean, but that's just me, right? I love the idea that we see his death in the credits. I love the idea that somehow this looks like it's going to work out, and then it doesn't work out. To me, it would be fitting in that he does not seem to. He's selling, like I said, a fairy tale. That cannot be his actual plan. Nothing about James Delaney says to me, I'm going to gather up all my buddies, and we're going to get on a boat, and we're going to sail to America, and everything's going to be fine. It just doesn't add up.
Well, again, I might get dark on you here. He never says really that we're going to sail away to the promised land. He says he's going to take them to the promised land. He might not be putting on a ship for a journey. He might be taking them on a one-way trip where they're all going to die together.
Big D, I think you got to join me at a goth club very soon. You're coming to our side, and I just love the way it's working. You were asking about sub-dom relationships. Now you're into flesh graters. I think you're on the right path, Big D. Just come into the fold. Just come to the dark side.
Yeah, because he's made it clear all those who he uses deserve to be used. He's not using, with the exception of Robert, innocent people. So if it was some final that he was taking them to the promised land, but it was one big, act that took all their lives, I think that would meet what he's been telling them all.
All right. So James sees that things are coming to an end, or maybe that not everything's going to work out. He's taking some very risky moves going into the tower. I think that explains why he treats Zilpha the way he does. It's not that he doesn't love her anymore. In fact, I think he's treating her that way because he does love her.
Totally agree, 100%. That was him being hard and pushing her away to protect her. He knew everyone around him will be collateral damage. And by being as cold to her and pushing her away and giving her, what did he call it? He said, this is for your widowhood, giving her the diamond. That's as cold a breakup as he could have, so that it would limit the chance that she gets pulled down in the black hole vortex that is James Delaney and his entire gang. I think he was protecting her.
Another piece of evidence that backs that up is when Zilpha's walking along the boardwalk and she sees the Feliz Aventurero, she sees James's ship and it's destroyed. She seems to not be expecting that. He has not told her about this. And again, I think that he's allowing her to believe all is better than it really is. He's allowing her to be ignorant to what's really going on, because he wants her to be a part of it. And I wonder if that's why he did not seem overjoyed that she killed Thorne, in the sense that she has now gotten rid of her husband and he was not planning on any safety for her.
Well, I think he was upset that she involved herself in it. He would have been okay to have been the one to kill Thorne and dispose of the body. But once she entangled herself in his mess, that does exactly the opposite of what he wants. He still does love her. He still wants to protect her. Even though he says, I don't believe we are one person anymore. It's obvious he does. She's smart enough. I think she's going to pick it up. I don't think she's going to go away quietly. This is definitely not the last we've seen of Zilpha.
It's interesting because we have a role reversal here. Remember when James initially was saying to Zilpha, she's like, this is the last we'll talk. And he says, no, it's not. You won't see me again. Yes, I will. You mentioned that it was the coldest breakup thing you could say is, the diamond is for your widowhood. To me, it was what you just mentioned. I believe that we were the same person and we're not. That is, anybody who's had that bond with a person, that when you're so in love with a person that you feel like you're a part of each other. And for a person to vocalize specifically that is not the case anymore, that's a dagger in the heart.
And I don't know if I'm the only one that feels this, but often betrayals of emotion and intimacy psychologically is much harder than physical, than sex. I've never had it directly happen that it was, a girlfriend had cheated physically, but I've had a good friend whose breakup, he found out that his wife had been having an affair with someone. He said it didn't hurt nearly as much as reading the text messages where they were speaking lovingly to each other. And for years, they had been secretly sharing emotional experiences that were private. And he felt more betrayed by the emotional aspect than the physical. And to that, I think you're right. For Zilpha to feel alone for the first time and that James would just sever that one real strong bond they have has to be the ultimate betrayal.
Yeah, and it really did hurt to see Zilpha in that pain. Again, I've mentioned that Una Chaplin is one of the stronger performances in this show. She played it really well. She is a woman that is ruined at this point. And I think that there was a subtlety to Tom Hardy's performance as well, where you could tell, even if you had not seen anything else in this show, you just watched this one scene, you would still tell by their body language, by the way they were in reference to each other, that neither of them or that he's not being genuine in this, and that and I agree with you that I think she will read that eventually. She's not going to give up just yet.
But God, we did the supercut of the Tom Hardy grunts through episode, I think it was 5. Somebody sent in that cut. This episode had to have 20 grunts.
Absolute grunt explosion on this one. It was insane.
This was a grunt fest. He was actually even adding to grunts like, in. He was grunting words. It was great. I think the grunt count has to be up. I think it was 72 after 5 episodes. We got to be in the 130 range. So listeners, please help us. We need a new grunt count.
When he was submerged with that mask and only the little straw poking out of the water, I think he even managed to grunt through there, which is really impressive. The man was born to grunt. With that concludes this week's episode of Shat on TV, Taboo FX. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat on TV. Also on Facebook, search for Shat on TV Podcasts. The website is shatontv.com. And again, if you'd like to email us, we are hosts at shatontv.com. We're everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by on iTunes, please be sure to leave a 5-star review. That helps the podcast grow. Also, you can check out our store on the website for cool Shat on TV merchandise that helps keep the lights on. If you don't necessarily want to write a river rant to us, but you'd like to have your name read on the podcast, we do have shout-outs. And that's a feature of our website. You can just go on shatontv.com, and there will be a little slide out. You click on it, and you can type in your name, and we'll give you a shout out on the air. It's always good to see the names of all the people who are listening out there, new names, and just kind of get to know you a little bit better. This week's shout outs go out to Gina, Tommy, Anne, Veronica, Stephanie, Matt, Cameron Barnes, the very formal one, and, of course, Crumpster. So thanks again for the shout-outs, guys. And, again, if you have thoughts, go ahead and email us, hosts at shatontv.com. We will have our last 2 river rants left. They'll be coming out on each Thursday this week and next.
And listen, this is from my wife. She hates the fact that we ask people for 5-star reviews. She's like, you shouldn't tell them what to give you. Don't give them. So I'm going to give a little modification here. We would love a 5-star review, but give us as many stars as you think we deserve. And we appreciate your review. That's for my wife.
I agree. And again, what you have to say about it is just as important as the amount of stars. So, but those really do, again, if you think about when people are finding a podcast and they're searching and they're going to type in Taboo, they're going to get on iTunes, and it could be a make or break between listening to the podcast and not. So it means a lot to us. We put a lot of our time into this. We don't make money. I haven't seen any yet. So this is a labor of love. So it just means a lot to us to read those reviews. It helps strengthen us every week when we're putting countless hours into this. So on behalf of my co-hosts, Big D and Roger Roper, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us on Thursday for the River Rants edition of Taboo FX. Also, if you like movies, we do have our sister podcast, shatthemovies.com. And this week's, the one that's already out right now, we just finished doing Revenge of the Nerds, which I didn't care for. Big D really liked.
Loved it.
And this week coming up, Big D, do we have a clear winner or can people still vote?
We do. This week's is closed. It's going to be Highlander, the fantasy, sword fighting, Sean Connery epic fest from 1984. This was hotly contested. It was a battle between that and Conan the Barbarian till the end, and there can be only one. Highlander.
I just can't wait for that Queen theme song to Highlander. It's brilliant. Anyway.
What is it? It's Do You Want to Live Forever, right?
I am immortal.
Oh, yeah. It's Do You Want to Live Forever? That's what it was.
There you go. You got a much better voice than I do, Big D.
Oh, thank you.
Anyway, so yes, that's it. So from Big D and me, we already said our farewell, so there's no need. We could just close out with Do You Want to Live Forever?
From Big D and me, when it's like a sitcom. Hi,
Big D and me.
It's Big D and me. Hi, how was your day there, Gene? That was great. The factory, they're just working me like a dog. Just close it and get out of here.
All right. I already did.
Did you?
It's already closed.
You said we'll see you next Thursday? Or see you Thursday?
Yeah, I already said that.
Okay, I guess we did. I'm stopping it then.